I'm Leonard. I'm your 4 o'clock.
I forgot. I'm so sorry.
The Umbrella Academy is one of the most wonderfully bonkers comic series of all time. The first arc alone features talking monkeys, time travelers, ghosts, aliens, and a special song with the power to destroy the world. That said, not everything about the Netflix series is faithful to co-creators Gerard Way and Gabriel Ba's original vision. Many key elements of the design of major characters have been completely overhauled for the switch to live action. The motivations behind most of these changes are pretty easy to understand, but a few are just puzzling. To help you sort through it all, we're here to run down each of the major characters in the Umbrella Academy and compare their appearance on the TV show to their original comic designs. You're not going to want to miss out on this. But before we get into the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you don't miss any of the new videos we post. First up, Luther, also known as Space Boy. We all know that Luther, as portrayed by Tom Hopper, is a massive slab of a man in the Netflix series, but believe it or not, his ludicrous physique was actually toned down from his original comics incarnation. The Luther of the comics has a far more inhuman appearance, which was the result of a far more extreme life-saving operation. In that continuity, Luther's entire head was surgically removed and transplanted onto the body of a gorilla. A Martian gorilla, incidentally. This version of Luther doesn't bother covering up his unusual appearance, possibly because it's pretty much impossible for him to do so. Also, one additional benefit of being an actual gorilla instead of just resembling one is that the comic version of Luther has prehensile feet, which, as you might imagine, ends up being handy in a variety of situations, if you know what I mean. Next up, Diego, the Kraken. Although both versions of Diego are equally broody on the inside, the Netflix Diego and the comic Diego diverge on the outside in 3 major ways. First up, physical appearance. Live-action Diego is played by David Castaneda, a Latino actor with dark hair, whereas in the comics Diego is blonde and looks much more Caucasian. The show Diego also has a noticeable scar on the side of his head, which his comic counterpart lacks. Second, his outfit. Comics Diego has one of the most memorable costumes of the family, a long-sleeve shirt with purple and black horizontal stripes and a prominent logo. In the show, it usually looks like Diego is wearing solid black, but it's difficult to say what color any part of his outfit is, given how much time he spends lurking in shadows. In those rare instances that Diego finds himself somewhere with decent lighting, he sometimes wears a shirt that has subtle stripes on it, but they're certainly not as visible as they are on his comic outfit, and he never has the logo. Darn it, I like that logo. Finally, his powers. The Diego of the show seems to have the ability to steer objects with his mind after throwing them, typically knives. Despite being similarly fond of knives, comic book Diego's powers don't relate to this affectation. Instead, he has the ability to hold his breath indefinitely. That's why this version of the character has the code name Kraken, which he does not seem to share with his television counterpart. And of course, Allison, the Rumor. She is one of several characters who helps bring the white cast of the original comic some much needed diversity. The Allison of the comics is, like pretty much everyone in that story, Caucasian. Another change to the Rumor's appearance is her hair. Unlike her television incarnation, who has dyed blonde hair, comic book Allison has purple hair. This seems to be natural too, because even in flashbacks depicting her as a baby, she's still sporting her purple dew. The biggest remaining difference between these two Rumors are their personalities. In the show, Allison has a dark secret. She used her mind control powers for personal gain consistently when she was younger, to gain wealth and fame, and most shockingly, modify the personality of her daughter. She came to deeply regret this and thus grew into a melancholy adult with a deep aversion to her own abilities. Allison from the comics is much more confident and hesitates far less before using her powers. Next up, Klaus, aka the Seance. If you think that Robert Sheehan's portrayal of Klaus looks a little pale and sick at times, he's got nothing on the comic version of the Seance. The original incarnation of the character has stark white skin, a physical manifestation of his connection to the world of the dead. I am so glad this guy's not real. Who could forget about number 5? Number 5 is one of the most wonderfully mind-bending characters in this entire cast of weirdos. A bitter, time-traveling 58-year-old man trapped in the body of a 13-year-old boy, played by 15-year-old boy Aidan Gallagher. That's 3 different ages, folks. He is perhaps the only Hargreaves child whose appearance was entirely unchanged during the adaptation. Still just a little boy in a school uniform, tiny shorts and all. It seems number 5's appearance might not just be consistent across space and time, but also across different mediums. Next, Ben, the Horror. Despite being dead since before the story started, the character of Ben, played by Justin H. Min, appears sporadically in the Netflix adaptation as a ghost that haunts Klaus and tries to serve as his conscience when he isn't being totally ignored. Because of how infrequently he appears, even after the end of the first season, we still don't know much about him. If you were hoping that digging into the comics will give you some information about what's up with horror, then we're sorry to disappoint you. He gets even less attention in the original version of the story. There are only scattered lines of dialogue that refer to him, and only a handful of comic panels that depict him. In most of them, his face is covered by his superhero mask. The only noticeable difference that we can confirm is that the comic Ben has naturally stark white hair, unlike show Ben's dark hair. And given how universally white the rest of the cast of the comic is, it's probably a safe bet that Ben being Asian was a change made by the creators of the show. Next, Vanya, the white violin. Given that she's ostensibly the normal one of the group in both tellings of the story, at least at first, Vanya Hargreaves looks fairly similar in her two incarnations. The main difference between them is that the show makes it much more prominent in her mannerisms and the way that she dresses, that Vanya is supposed to be shy and plain looking. Even after becoming a supervillain, Vanya of the show dresses fairly conservatively in a three-piece suit. In the comics, despite ostensibly being the normal one, Vanya's posture and dialogue always conveys confidence from the beginning. Then, once she becomes a full-on villain, she becomes an unrepentantly murderous diva who delights in making her siblings suffer to a much greater degree than the more measured and sympathetic incarnation of the show. Vanya also dons a white, skin-tight costume that Elliot Page's more reserved take on the character would never be caught dead in. The white violin is a wonderfully cheesy villain in the comics, and her outfit is one of the most simultaneously absurd and iconic character designs of all time. It would be quite impressive to see more of this character's look transferred directly to live action. On the other hand, Elliot Page serving us dead-eyed stares in a tailored suit is fierce. What about Mom and Dad? To the casual viewer, Colm Feore's portrayal of Reginald Hargreaves seems totally unchanged from the comics, an old-timey British man with a mustache and a monocle. However, one panel from the comic hints at a significant divergence between these two incarnations of Reggie. It shows Hargreaves in front of his bathroom sink, with his face, an artificial human mask, sitting beside him. Yes, in both versions of the story, Reginald is secretly an alien. Fans of Mom will be happy to learn that the Hargreaves' favorite artificial parent is also featured in the comics. However, this version has dark hair, unlike the blonde Jordan Claire Robbins in the show. Also, comic Mom is more noticeably artificial, with obvious tells such as visible joints and screws on her arms. Next, the Handler, also known as Carmichael. In the comics, we know less about the organization, and its leader is much stranger. You might be noticing a trend at this point. The equivalent organization is called the Temps Aeternalis, and we don't see whether or not their offices are similarly stuck in the 1950s, but we do get to meet their leader, a fellow by the name of Carmichael. Although he and the Handler are equally fond of delivering icy ultimatums to the unfortunate Hargreaves children, Carmichael isn't a towering blonde beauty, or even a human at all. He's yet another talking animal. Those of you who had money on Primate, sorry, but today is not your lucky day. Carmichael is a shabunking goldfish in a fishbowl sitting on the shoulders of some artificial human body. As you might imagine, this is never explained. It remains yet another delightfully odd touch in this inexplicably strange setting. And last but not least, Leonard, the conductor. The character of Leonard from the Netflix series doesn't appear in the comics, but there is an equivalent comics baddie who helps transform Vanya into the villainous white violin. In the comics, the closest Leonard analog is a mysterious man only known as the Conductor, who dresses in a three-piece suit with a long tailcoat and wears a frightening skull mask at all times. Because of this, as you might imagine, Conductor is plainly evil from the beginning, far more blunt in his methods than the unassuming Leonard. He comes to Vanya cold with a totally transparent proposition to get revenge against the rest of her family, something that the show's Vanya would never agree to do. Fortunately for him, comic Vanya needs far less prodding to turn to the dark side. And that wraps up the video. Thanks for watching!